This is Bear. She has no money, no prospects, and is a burden to her parents, I'm afraid.
This is Nith. She used to make rocket. She was a rocket scientist.
In the backyard.
Now she's my podcast co-host, climbing up the professional ladder there.
Only, scans.
We are doing this and we're here today because despite the fact that we both studied and are currently doing very different things, we both love to talk to each other specifically. And we love to talk about books that we're reading and shows that we're watching. And we've been told by a lot of our friends that it's very interesting to listen to us talk.
Yeah.
So we were like, why restrict that to people who are physically around us? We should do something for the world at large.
Yeah.
And put ourselves out there.
Yeah. I would also love to document some of this.
Because we were talking today about how some of the books that we read growing up, or even some of the books that we kind of accidentally stumbled upon, have not had the same kind of exposure in the world for people to like
Yes.
know about them, pick them up. It's really nice for us to be able to tell people like, hey, you should pick this up and this could mean the same thing to you that it means to us.
Yeah, I also really love Persephone books for that same reason. So they're a publishing house that specializes in reprinting overlooked, neglected works of fiction and non-fiction, primarily by women from mid 20th century. So they have about like maybe 150-ish titles, and these are some really like intelligent, beautifully written books that deserve to be rediscovered and read.
Which is beyond cool to me. Like
Yeah.
to get to read like which one, Flush? You were
Oh
telling
yeah,
me about
Virginia Woolf's
Virginia
Flush,
Woolf's Flush.
or Catherine Mansfield's just her journal her husband published after she passed. And yeah, I think we might pick some from those later on.
We should also put a link somewhere for their website so people can go check it out if they also find this interesting.
Yes, we'll add a Substack attached to every episode that has all our resources, references,
So many recommendations.
so many recommendations.
We want everyone to read something. If we find something interesting, we want everyone to read it immediately. You'll get a lot of recommendations out of us. Which brings us to the book that we did end up reading this month.
Yeah.
We read it twice, I believe, to like fully
Cover to
grasp.
cover.
So we are talking about a book called Desperately Seeking Shahrukh by Shayana Bhattacharya that talks about the economics of being a woman in India and the escapism of the fandom of Shah Rukh Khan for the women of India.
Yeah. Shah Rukh
Heavy
Khan,
stuff.
I know nothing about him. But this book taught me so much about him.
I know everything about it.
Two best friends.
So the reason I told you about this book is because I thought that the author being a senior economist, being an academic, being a little bit of a numbers nerd about it was something very you to me. And as I predicted, you absolutely loved it.
It's a memoir in some capacity. It is also economic analysis. It is film criticism. There is some gossip here. I think this book is sort of written for women in India who are holding their jobs in this labor market, but it is written in a very filmy way. So, unlike most other economic books you might read, the author does write a lot about herself. And the
Which
book
we
is a
love.
lot more, yeah, it is very entertaining. There's a lot of sly nods to Jane Austen or like Nancy Milford. So, if you are someone who loves reading, you might have some Easter eggs in the book, and it's fantastic.
And you have, like us, grown up in that era of Bollywood, and you have that love for the early 2000s Shah Rukh Khan movies, the romance, the music, then this book definitely speaks to you.
Yeah, she uses Shah Rukh Khan like he's like a lens through which she talks about, how women are navigating romance, labor, like family expectations, their own aspirations in a very rapidly changing economy. I love that Shah Rukh Khan brings such a lightness to this conversation, such an openness, and you see it with some of the interviews and conversations she's had with the women, that they're a lot more excited to talk about him. They're a lot more open to share their feelings. And he represents currency for women in a way, because leisure is a very economic, political,
Yeah.
you know, weapon for women. And how we choose to spend money, where we choose to spend money matters.
But also, like, I want to note, we are not talking about the person Shah Rukh Khan, because the author is not
No.
talking about the person Shah Rukh Khan. We are talking about the persona of Shah Rukh Khan. So this book is not like a memoir of him. Basically, what the premise of it is, as the economist, as in her line of work, when she was conducting surveys of working women, she found that they were no longer as willing to engage with people who claimed to be helping them. So when she went on the ground level to talk to these women, she found that they were less willing to talk to her about the nitty-gritties of their life, their problems, just because they'd already talked about it so much to no effect. But what they were willing to talk about was more light-hearted, more of conversational topics like Bollywood. And one of the main things that she found across the strata was women and how they were willing to and wanted to talk about their fandom of SRK.
Yeah, I would love to start with, I know we don't want to talk about SRK, but let's talk a little bit about SRK.
I always want to talk about SRK.
Yes. So I am someone who doesn't know too much about SRK or his movies. Like, I know very specific movies, I guess, like Dawn or Kal Ho Na Ho, because, we were both born in like very late 90s. So Shah Rukh Khan for us was very different than,
I know
people born
everything
in.
there is to know about SRK.
I know. I'm saying typically. Like, a lot of his soft boy romance movies, I think, came out, before we were born. It was
I just want
difficult
to
for me
say,
to, yeah,
I watched Dar.
you're
So,
insane.
I don't know what you're talking about. I had a thing for him in Dar.
Fair enough. But basically, I didn't. And for me, it was when I like started reading, like the premise was so dazzling to me, honestly, that I wanted to love this book. I love this book. Even if I hadn't read it, I would have loved this book. Okay. Um, but anyway, so some things about Shah Rukh Khan that people younger might not know. He was this new age voice, and he talked about, being middle class, talked about his wife and women in a way that no one had spoken about before. And even though, some part of it is performative, but as you see in this book, someone says it's like, it doesn't matter. They appreciated that he said it at all. And he talked about, access to toilets and like a lot of things actually. So I did want to talk about how, 80 Shah Rukh Khan and the Shah Rukh Khan we know, there's a lot to SRK. So given, like, knowing all this after reading the book, it makes sense why women love SRK. He has these soulful eyes. He has great hair. Anyone with great hair, I love. He is very obsessed with female gaze or the gaze of the other person. Like, he really sees you, it
Yeah.
feels when he talks. And even women in his movies, like, the author talks about the fact that, women speak way more in his movies. So who is Shah Rukh Khan to you, and what is Shah Rukh Khan to you?
Shah Rukh Khan to me is my first crush. Like, I had never really like felt that way about a celebrity before I saw him. And I completely relate to not only the author but a lot of the women that she depicts in this book. And one of the things I actually made a note on, because I thought that those two things were so beautifully linked. So I think in the very first chapter, she says that data shows that a majority of Indian women have sacrificed careers and the world beyond their homes for their family and for their children, right? I think this is indicative of the group of people who Shah Rukh Khan appeals to, or who are wanting the escapism of a fandom, wanting the escapism of something that they can only imagine. And then she goes on to say that as Raj in DDLJ, his character played rugby with the boys and raced aeroplanes, but also helped an aunt select which sari to buy. He fasted on Karwa Chauth with Simran, and it wasn't the usual one-sided ritual that he also served guests like women are expected to do, and we'd never seen a combination like that before. He redefined masculinity on screen. And I think that is so much the crux of like what I saw in him and also what other women see in him.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, when you look at the statistics, most women don't watch movies. Like,
It's 22% of men report making a monthly visit to a cinema hall, where only
right.
8% of adult women report visiting a hall at least once a month.
Yeah. So where are they getting Shah Rukh Khan from? It's from songs. It's from the interviews I was talking about.
The author herself says that if you think about it in terms of the numbers, then SRK is catering to a minority group of the moviegoers. He's actually making movies for the 8% instead of the 22%. And she says, which I love, limited access to media devices or lack of independent incomes mean no time for fun. Unfriendly public spaces and rising ticket prices all conspire to restrict the number of women who can enjoy a film. And all of like this is statistic about women going to a cinema hall to watch a movie, but it is so indicative of the lives of women in this country who are restricted by not just one thing, but a whole combination of things that make up their living situation.
Yeah, there are not enough spaces for women to leisure or opportunities. And he is, yeah, a great way to think about, their desires. What all of the people in this book like about SRK is so interesting because she says like most men like SRK because of his social mobility. I think Vidya in the book also says this where she's like, I love Shah Rukh Khan because he's like me. He's rose through the ranks. So men who are fans of Shah Rukh love that he is someone who's well off. It's such a different perspective versus a lot of women in this book love him for his, tenderness, his vulnerability, things like that.
Also, since you spoke about Vidya, what I really liked about her story is so relatable, it's so genuine because the author says she and Vidya meet in a movie theater in Delhi. And she also talks about how what an anomaly it is because as people in our 20s who are looking for professional opportunities, who are busy with work, who are, kind of our life is so full that meeting new people and meeting new people who align with your beliefs, who align with your ideas, is nearly impossible. Like, we've known each other through school, but most people, when they're out in today's world trying to make new connections, that's very difficult. And one of the ways that women do make connections and keep connections, which we know because that's also the base of our friendship, is through fandom. It's through sharing of likes and dislikes and hobbies. And a very important part of this is to actually be allowed to cultivate these interests and these hobbies and be allowed exposure to these things and don't really have that access and that support in the larger system in terms of their movement, in terms of the spaces that they're allowed to inhabit, public spaces, workspaces, household spaces.
So not only do they not have movement, but there's also no appreciation anywhere. Like women are not appreciated at home where they do a lot of invisible work. Urban women spend about 5 hours every day doing housework versus men spend about 29 minutes or something. So they're unappreciated at work and they're also unappreciated at home. Like now you're expected to do both. Like the book starts with a graph a lot of people have seen because it was plastered on every newspaper possible. And it is from 1997 to now, and it looks at urban female employment or participation in the labor force and rural, and both have gone down. As a country, we love topping from the bottom. What I really wanted to talk about, as we've gotten better as a country economically, we've hit something called a Sanskritization effect. So Sanskritization effect is as people have made more money, they have sort of purchased upper class rituals and norms and socialized women to believe that job is not core to their identity anymore. So somehow less women are working now. In top 10% of income households, only 6% women work.
Like, Brahminical patriarchy is something that I don't think gets talked about enough. Like you said, it's almost a trade off to be part of a more elite group of people where patriarchy tends to get actually more entrenched
Yeah.
for the women who are part of that group. Because in this book, we meet a lot of women who are more in the working class. And even though they are also facing a lot of problems that are based in the system, they still have freedom of movement in terms of the work, in terms of like income. But even that looks very different for them on account of them being women.
Yes. Okay, as we've grown as an economy, construction, like manufacturing, the liberalization has only been for men because it is very onerous for women to continue working when these are the things that are paid for. And we looked at some home based garment workers, right? And even though they're able to, I guess, work and have some economic activity, they're still hired through a man, the person you reach out to, who then finds all these workers or has all these workers under him. So even in places where it looks like we've reached parts of the economy where there is less literacy and there is more abject poverty, it's still sad that men are at the forefront of economic gain always.
And it also plays a role in the personal lives of these women. Even though they are on paper becoming financially independent, we do see that they are still not given the freedom to express that independence, be appreciated and seen and acknowledged, and the power to actually use their finances in a way that they desire. Like we
Yes.
see in the first chapter, the story of this accountant who is very intelligent and does well in competitive exams and gets a very well paying job, and all she wants to, or all she does with her money, is spend a little bit of it to go to the theater and watch a Shah Rukh Khan movie, and that is very quickly taken away from her by her parents. And we're talking about like an adult earning woman who's not allowed to go to the cinema alone to watch a movie she wants because the society around her is afraid of her expressing her desire for something.
Yeah. The part where she buys her cousin a bike
Yes.
and is not credited as the person who bought it was so upsetting.
There's no acknowledgement. Like admiration is not even on the page. There's no acknowledgement. There is no, they're not being seen. And I
Yeah.
think the large part of why like a figure like SRK ties in so much with the lives of these women is like you said in the beginning, what he represents is a man who's actually seeing women. He is talking about women with so much love and respect and admiration, not just in the movies, but even in his interviews or whatever his public platforms, which I think for a large part women in this country don't get.
And there is almost this tax. There is a tax when you are doing really well as a woman, where as you make more money, as you have more economic freedom, as you get more educated, you are taxed in the society. Instead of you being, revered and congratulated, you're almost pushed to the side as atypical. And it's hard to keep at it, which is why this book feels like it's telling you, hey, I see you, and all these other women in this book see you. And we
Yeah.
all know it's hard. One of the biggest problems is that there is no recognition of care given by women at home, and there is no Indian
Given
government
to
does not
given
given
at home.
to like care labor, as in like at home, like all the housework,
Ha
right?
ha ha.
So
Yeah.
many women drop out of the labor force because of motherhood, and India as a country does not spend enough on care infrastructure.
Yeah.
It really hinders women, like having old people in home they have to care about, having kids at home to care about, and it is not rewarded. And as we've seen, more money, more jobs in this country, we haven't seen a renegotiation of what household work looks like.
The funniest kind of thing I've come across, which struck me, I was watching a video someone made where they did street interviews asking men what they thought of their partner not being willing to live with their parents. And the overarching feeling the men had about this was, oh, I want my partner to also care about my parents. Like, why would I abandon my parents? And it's like, well, I mean, she has parents too. The other thing is for men to go out and say, oh, I want a partner who cares about my parents, who's going to help my parents, who's going to take care of them. Most of these men do not participate in the household labor that would be required to care for their parents.
And then women are social, like women don't leave, they're not pressurized, like they don't say like my husband wants to leave my job all the time. It's
Yeah.
more this like ingrained socialization that, or like it's more because workplaces are so toxic. We never focus on the fact that women are almost kicked out of the labor market because of these random bro codes and nonsense you have to deal with, and how you have to prove your worth rather than, no one gives you benefit of doubt, basically.
Also, like you said in the beginning, like today, traditional corporate work day is about 8.5 hours now. Look at the news that's going on, and they're planning to increase it to a 10-hour work day, which I think is insanity. But if you think about a woman's life in as a working woman in a corporate industry in India, think of an 8 to 10 hour work day, and the statistic you talked about before is 5 hours of household chores once they're back. That's a 15-hour work day,
Yeah.
and 5 hours of that is unpaid, unappreciated, unacknowledged labor.
So is the other 10.
So is the other 10. But
Not
I'm
like,
willing to say it's unapppreciated and unacknowledged across the board. So
yeah, and I don't listen. If someone wants to stay at home and take care of anyone's parents, I get it. But then acknowledge that, like reward it, appreciate it a lot more than you do, you know?
and
Like that is a
reward I
full-time
want
like
to say,
job.
reward also means gratitude. Like I'm not saying,
Like
like I
very
we don't
much.
mean reward as in like bring them gifts and like take them out. Like that's not reward, that's your job as a partner. Like that's what you're supposed to do in a relationship. Reward literally just means gratitude and admiration for a person who's willing to go above and beyond emotionally, mentally, and physically for someone that you care about.
Right? It's like, oh, my husband makes enough money and I'll just drop out now because he makes enough that I don't want to stay and deal with how difficult workforce, how difficult it is to hold a job as a woman. To keep
Yeah.
a job in this country as a woman is very annoying.
In
And,
many cases, it's
when we
also
look
not
at
safe. Like
yeah,
if
not, I was
safety
going to
is
say,
such
yeah,
a
not safe.
yeah.
You don't like, there's so much, sexual harassment or microaggressions. And not just that, but all the industries, like in the fastest growing sectors here, only 19% of jobs are for women, basically. In
That's
the fastest growing
insane.
sectors,
If you
right?
think
Guys, the fact that in higher educational institutes, women, it's 50-50. If anything, women are more
more
educated than
educated,
men. And one of the good things is that that does mean women enter the labor market at a different point, right? Instead of you going in entry level, now you're coming in somewhere slightly higher than that because you're more educated. But then the minute, you choose to be a mother, you are immediately out. Different story for the mom versus the dad because there is motherhood penalty, which is something Claudia Goldin has documented across decades of her research. She's a Nobel winning economist. And her studies show that basically once kids enter the picture, women's earnings typically dip and never fully recover. And men see the opposite. They see a fatherhood premium and moms see a motherhood penalty. She's also found that this penalty is worse in certain jobs, like greedy jobs, like finance, law, consulting, where success is hugely dependent on how constantly available you are. And these structures punish flexibility, right? Which is exactly what mothers need a lot. And so, in the bigger picture, this pay gap isn't always about individual choices. It's deeply tied to how work is structured and how society values caregiving. And Gordon's work reminds us that until workplace, and policies don't evolve to support families, mothers will keep paying a price their fathers don't.
and a lot of the onus of parenting falls on the woman just on account of men not participating.
And where this is something we talk about a lot, which is like
Yeah.
weaponized incompetence,
Yeah.
you know?
How
I
how
just
do I do something if I don't know how to do this?
not just you don't do it, but oh, you do it so much better
You
than
do
I
it so
do.
much better.
Like it's also because when you grow up as a woman, you're just taught to do a lot more house chores.
I know a lot of women who have been studying for a long time, either to do engineering or to do medicine. So they've never in their family been encouraged to do household chores or encouraged to do anything but study, right? They are still expected to do it once they're married.
The idea that you can just be sat outside with relatives in this country as a woman is very uncomfortable
Yeah.
because they expect you to get up and they expect you to entertain, and that burden is still very much carried by women in the family, no matter how old you are.
They are expected by not only the groom's parents but by their own family to now learn and adapt to working inside a house. The expectation doesn't go away. Wanted to talk about the themes that this book tackles, which I really like, one of which is vulnerability, both in women and in men. I think the author using her own life, her own experiences, her own heartbreaks, her own rejections, sets the tone for kind of like, it almost reads like her personal journal in some cases. What really struck me was that the author depicts her life not just in a positive light, but in a very gray shaded, complex, layered light. And as she does the stories of the women, that each of them is a complex network of stories, and as is the author's own experiences. It's not really
Yeah.
meant to be palatable, it's just meant to depict a reality.
She's part of
Yeah.
this. She's writing about something she cares about. And it is so unlike to do that in, the field of economics. A lot of the research papers, they're so dry. So I love that you have a book that is looking at people's lives and the complexities of their experiences.
It gives a face and a name and a personality to what essentially was a number on the scale. I think we have to be aware of the fact that these numbers represent real people with real lives and a real impact on their lives. Story that really struck out to me was the girl who was a house help called Lily, who comes from abusive situation and works as a house help in the house of NRI or expats who are living here. And she talks about how she uses music videos and movies to escape the reality of her life. And this is the, if we talk about the social and financial class that people like Lily make up, that is one of the largest parts of India's population.
Yeah.
And
Her
this
story was,
so beautifully depicted because this book shows us who she is as a woman, what she wants, the way that she kind of talks about Khan songs like SRK movies as somebody who's trying to romanticize the life that she's kind of forced to live.
yeah, there is like the conversations between the author and Lily and every other person here are so intimate. Like you feel so involved and you feel part of their story a little bit.
It can seem kind of unrealistic to have expectations or fantasies of someone who doesn't even really exist, right? Like what they are looking at is a brand, or it's a creation meant for public consumption.
Yeah, and there are so many things SRK says that are very like there's one specific thing at World Economic Forum where someone asked him like, do you think men and women are equal? And then he says, no, I think women are better than men. Who says this? You know what I mean? A part of this is definitely, very dramatic. I still love that he talks about it.
Like I said, I've watched a lot of his interviews, I've watched a lot of his stuff, and I distinctly remember there's an interview he did. I believe this was for Dilwale. After the movie came out, he did an interview with Kajol, and he talked about how appalled he was by how like young boys talk to young girls. But he's like, I would never like talk to a woman the way I would talk to a man. Like I'm always much more respectful, even if she's my friend.
Yeah, he's a little bit of a golden boy sort of. This is a brand for him at the end of the day. Makes sense. And it's such a nice brand. Like I like the brand.
The idea that what he's selling and what women are buying and want to buy is a chivalrous feminist man is so telling about what we don't have around us.
I have a hard time defining anyone as a feminist. It's more like a lifestyle for me, like veganism. And this book, yes, it talks about SRK, it talks about who he is, but it talks about what it means to be a fan. I think fandom is such an amorphous concept, and we've engaged in it a lot between you and me. Oh my god, that's all we do, it feels like. You are part of something that is so large. It is definitely the power of community, and you are able to talk about something that almost escapes class and social restrictions. While your life might fit into the strict constraints of patriarchy, when you talk about your fandom, those walls that divide us sort of dissolve.
One of the biggest parts is how it is accepting and also, in a way, breaks the barrier of shame, because what you would maybe not be able to share is very easily expressed, accepted, and reflected to you within a community of people who share that.
Yeah, let's talk about the kind of fans we are or the fandoms we sort of engage in. It's more of an extracurricular activity for us.
That's my main
Uh,
activity. Everything else is extracurricular. This is what I'm doing
so,
primarily.
so when we talk about fandom and sort of the fictionality that we see on the internet, like let's talk about AO3, let's talk about Tumblr, the sort of imaginative expansion we do with some of these fandoms, say, Sherlock or Merlin or Harry Potter. These are some of the big ones that we followed for years. It feels so nice to look at these works that might not be, for the female gaze, were not initially meant to target women or anything like that. But whenever there's a fan fiction about these things, the person writing it, mostly it's women, they will rewrite it through such a distinct perspective. Like they're using the characters, but whatever they create is so original. And it sort of tells you that there is such a big gap in mass media that women are not given anything to consume directly for them. We have to sort of turn it into something we like and then consume it.
I think women and people who belong to minority spaces, LGBTQ communities, who belong to identities that they are not given representation for, kind of find that representation and acknowledgement and acceptance within fandom cultures, because the spectrum of normalcy is so much wider.
Right.
The ways of expression are so varied. You don't really like the boxes that exist in the outside world don't exist in these spaces.
A lot of times, whatever restrictions are set by the author, all of us fans and fanfic writers, they renegotiate these terms that the original author has set. So a lot of the stories and the plot lines borrow very little other than character backgrounds, in my experience. So well written, so well articulated, so well conceptualized. And AO3 as a community is such a stark example of what it means to have a community that cares. Like AO3 is built by women, it's built for women, it's all in house. They have
Which
their
is so
own
cool.
peer reviewed journal. Like it's
So cool.
every time they ask for money, they get way more than what they ask for. I love you.
I also want to point out, I think the people that are writing them and the people that are conceptualizing them have real lived experiences of a lot more of the world than the people who are creating mass consumption media. There are very few major publishing houses that have the distribution power to make something mainstream for the shelves of mainstream bookstores.
Yeah.
And because that small group of people is limited by their limited life experiences, what we get is a very watered down version of the very real lives that most of the consumer audience is living. Whereas
Yeah.
when you look at these like for free, like you talked about AO3 or any kind of online fandom platform, we are getting the real lived experiences and the fears and the anxieties and the joys of people who live such diverse and difficult lives that you are actually, even if you can't relate to it, you feel so emotionally impacted by what it is you are reading.
Like when you see it in this book too, right? What SRK represents, what women want in this book is love, affection, care, appreciation, which are
It's so
such
basic.
basic wants.
It's
Yeah. Like,
not it's not just sad because it's happening to someone, it's sad because it's the byproduct of a system that instills this. If you don't participate in this, you are actually the anomaly and you're paying the price by giving up your ecosystem, your support system, and society that you're part of. In this book, she talks about Gold, a stewardess in Delhi who has left her house to do this job, and she's the first woman, I think, in her family who goes out and does a job and earns money. And we talk about not only is she doing this job, like she's sleep deprived, she is working all the time because she's working on overnight flights. She's also thinking about the fact that she's thinking about the way that society perceives her. She's thinking about her parents, she's thinking about her family, she's thinking about how all of this fits into the life that she wants and the life that she's expected to have. And that is so indicative of what life for working women is like.
Yeah. The loneliness comes from the lack of acknowledgement of their work,
Yep.
you know? And the title is so apt, is they are desperately seeking affection and attention and love from a man they, want to choose. Like you choose to be a fan of someone, right? It's an active choice. They want to choose the person they love.
And
A
also,
choice that is not afforded to people.
they want to choose from options that actually appeal to who they are and the life that they want to live. Like both the author and her friend Vidya, who are both very successful, financially independent, who are very well traveled, well educated. And one of the biggest problems that they both face in relationships is finding men who appreciate these things about them, who appreciate their successes, who appreciate their personalities, and appreciate what they've achieved in their life. And it's not only that, like, they come from the privilege and they come from the spaces where they are, you know, choosing their own partners, looking for partners on their own. But what they're met with is a group of people they would have to settle for or would have to, in a way, dim themselves down for in order to be acceptable to these men.
Yeah. I actually love one of the things she says. It's a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in a want of wife. That's what Jane Austen says.
Yeah.
So what Bhattacharya instead says is, in Delhi, it is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be busy building a harem. Delhi is another character in this book, guys.
My brain is still stuck on weird modes. My brain just went Delhi, Delhi, Delhi. Have you seen Delhi 6? What did you think of Delhi 6 as a movie that uses Delhi as a backdrop?
Very nice. It is a lot of like Purani Delhi though. I
Yeah.
didn't really go there a lot. But yeah, I feel like this author could write. It would be very nice to read a whole book by her about Delhi. Such a unique place. This book has such interesting stylistic choices and tonality. Her whole confessional memoir style way of writing, you almost feel like you're reading a filmy gossip column, but then she blends all of that in so well with the statistics and the very harsh, sad facts about women and employment in this country.
I also like that she uses a lot of very basic storytelling, almost poetic writing tools, writing styles to set the mood. Like she uses a lot of emphasis on certain adjectives. She's a lot of alliteration, a lot of these poetic phrases
Yeah.
that are meant to make you settle into whether she's feeling like frustration, whether she's feeling rejection or heartbreak. Like she uses words like burned and bruised, or she'll say something like,
Scared single women, relentless replays, or six pack substitute sentimental.
you love that one.
I love that one. If this book's audio version, I can imagine is incredible to hear. Also, if they ever, decide to make this a movie, because I do feel like it could get adapted into
It
a
would be a
series
nice
of some
mini
sort.
series.
It
It'd be
would
a
be
very,
an amazing miniseries.
like one of those. I don't know. Did you see the what was it called?
Anthologies.
Anthologies. There was one. It was called like love story, something urban. It was based on urban Mumbai. Modern love. I really love what she does by like laying out these almost anecdotal pieces next to her interviews and her own observations about when she was conducting these interviews with these women. And then she also intersperses it with data in a way that it's not jarring, in a way that is not unfamiliar for someone who's not from that
Yes.
background. My favorite part is very first line of the book. She says, "My life has always been heteronormative hell." And it just immediately sets the tone for what you're getting as you step into this. She's talking about her life, she's talking about her relationships, and she's talking about that in this context of modern day India and the shared experience of what it's like being a woman in modern day India.
It's very like the person who wrote about it's like a play on Odd Girl something. What is it called? Sorry, it's Vivian Gornick.
Huh, Odd Woman and the City.
And the City. Sorry, my bad.
I love that it's so personal. I love that it is relatable and it's sending a message that women are tied together by the virtue of their shared experiences as a woman.
Yeah.
And I thoroughly enjoy how she personifies her loneliness as first as her companion, like somebody who's been with her, like who's her loneliness has seen her through the good times and the bad. And she also talks about how at her worst moments it like acts as this voice in her head that reminds her that she is in fact alone, which is something so many of us feel and so many of us go through on a day-to-day basis.
The little girl from Lizzie McGuire, you know, the one that like
I
sits.
love her.
I feel like all of us have something like that. You feel so lonely in so many spaces. So you, or I guess I constantly have this little version of me that travels with me everywhere who's sort of with you through thick and thin. I'm constantly thinking about myself.
That's completely normal. I don't know what you're talking about. That is so normal, aren't we all? She also says, talking about during the pandemic and what she was seeing around her, and she paints a very vivid picture about daily wage workers who had to walk back to their villages because there was no arrangement for them to go back home and check on their loved ones. And she talks about in her neighborhood seeing families who depend on their domestic help
Mhm.
to come in every day, having to, and seeing women primarily having to work for entire families during the lockdown,
Yeah.
and men looking busy on phone calls, but not really participating in the actual labor of looking after a family without any help. And she says this line, which really stood out to me, where she says, I felt grateful that I was doing fewer dishes and had the freedom to participate in the world as a paid professional. But even though she feels that, she feels this privilege for not being one of those women, she also sees these same women sitting, talking to their husbands in the evenings, and seeing this companionship between a couple and wanting that. And so seamlessly, she adds the data of there was a surge in registrations for online, matrimonial sites. And that data kind of gives her comfort that she's not alone in this quest for finding and looking for a companion, looking for a partner.
And honestly, going back a little bit about what you said about, transport, I feel like transport market and housing market needs to change a lot for women to be able to hold better jobs. It's hard to get from one place to another in an economical way.
That is
And
also safe.
yeah, there's also safe. And unless we as a country build better infrastructure around transport, it's so much harder for women to keep and also get high paying jobs. The housing market, right? It is so difficult to find a place to rent as a single woman, and it is even more difficult to find a place you want to buy.
I know someone who was trying to rent a house in Pune, and the landlord, asked her to bring an NOC from her father
What?
for renting a house. So landlord asked her to bring like a letter of consent from her father specifically, not her parents, her father, stating that they were okay with her living on her own. And this is a
For
26-year-old adult woman earning on her own, mind you. I want to kind of come to, you've read this book, you've loved this book, you've read this book again, and you liked it even more the second time around. Who or what kind of audience would you recommend this book to?
obviously, I would recommend it to all the young working women I know, because this book validates all the feelings you have. Everyone who reads this book to give it to their exes, ex-boyfriends, ex-husbands.
God, I don't know if you saw, but the author, she talked about how because she mentions her ex-partners, she actually had to go and get them to consent. Like she had to send them the script and get them to consent to being published in this book. Can you imagine? I would never. I could never.
I mean, this is 15 years of her work. I feel like
I still could never. I would do the old-fashioned blackout technique where after you print, you put blackout ink on it and then you have to hold it up to light to see what's written on it. That way, I
yeah.
don't need consent and I can legally publish everything I want. That's the plan.
What about you? Who would you recommend it to?
I would recommend this book to young men and especially people working in sociology and economics and the kind of fields where they are working with the data and statistics representing people. They can kind of get an idea of what it looks like to be inclusive of empathy in their work.
A little reality check.
A little reality check.
I made like a little reading list based on
Gimme.
all the resources. If you like this, you might like this.
Love that. Can you tell me your top three?
I haven't read all of these books. What Men Value and What Women Are Worth, which is Counting for Nothing by Madeline Waring, and Poor Economics, which is a famous book that Abhijit Banerjee has written with Esther Duflo. I don't know if that's how you say her last name, I'm sorry. Also Fierce Attachments by Vivian Gornick, which is that memoir-esque writing. Another one I found from her interviews was Mobile Girls Kotam, Working Women Speak, which is actually another podcast which started from similar fieldwork and surveying and was turned into a book, which is very fascinating. I also, from her interviews, found out platform. It's called Bahujan Economists. It is a platform for researchers. So, very cool things.
Do you think, or rather, how do you think Arundhati Roy's Ministry of Utmost Happiness would tie into this reading list?
I think Arundhati Roy is maybe too strictly fictional for me. I mean, I like her work. I will say her book is popular and nice enough that can fit into any list, honestly.
Fiction, I have a big fiction preference. And while I was reading this, I was thinking about like the anecdotal nature of real life stories of people in difficult situations, kind of based in the North Indian zone, their culture. And I immediately thought of Ministry of Utmost Happiness because it has a very similar feel to it. Even though I think this book that we read is quite a bit more lighthearted. But I think if you don't mind a little heaviness and a little tragedy, you might enjoy that in the anecdotal zone.
Yes, that is true. And I will also maybe recommend, if you like some of the feminist inklings in this book, you might like Bell Hooks, which I love Bell Hooks, some of the essays. There's so many. We'll put our heads together.
But do you want to do some interesting facts about the man, the myth himself, Mr. SRK?
Mr. Khan.
Mr. Khan. Did you know he has a dog named Chewbacca, apparently?
That makes me like him more.
I don't know how accurate this is because I got it off IMDb. What I do know and what I is factually accurate is that him and I share a birthday month.
November!
Yeah, we're both Scorpios.
Ooh.
Can't you tell? I'm really following in his footsteps.
The only sort of fact I know is that apparently he has read the book or received the book. I'm not really sure.
He's talked about this book for sure.
I know that the author did get to meet him.
I would love to.
I guess I just have to write a 2,000-word book to meet Shah Rukh Khan. That's the only way.
No biggie. No biggie.
No
I see you
biggie.
doing that this year.
Anyway, if you want to support SRK, he would definitely want you to support this podcast.
He's a huge fan of ours, and
Mr.
he's
Khan is a huge fan of this podcast.
if you want to be like Shah Rukh Khan, please follow us.
Yes. I think we need to start putting disclaimers. I don't want to get sued.
For legal reasons, none of this information is accurate, and
No,
it is
does
all
not
based on
represent
our
anyone's sentiments.
it's all based on our very limited understanding of the world.
Listen, just because Bear is going to be a lawyer doesn't mean we need to employ her immediately for this podcast. Free of cost, of course.
Just because I'm going to be a lawyer doesn't mean I'm going to be a good one. I think that needs to be taken into consideration.
But yeah.
I'm going to specialize in something very niche and useless, like literary law. Just watch me after 3 years.
We have to do an episode on the werewolf smut fighting. Guys.
I don't know how you got that from literary
Because
law.
it has legal stuff that you might find exciting.
Oh,
And it
yes,
has-
yes, 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 yes,
It
yes,
has
yes,
the
yes.
werewolf AB, what is it called? Omegaverse.
Omegaverse, ABO.
Literally fighting.
Totally. Great. So, wrapping up, this was Desperately Seeking Shah Rukh, and I still am. And we'll see you next time with more, hopefully, good book recommendations that a few of you
Yeah.
enjoy.
Yes. Thank you.
Bye, Mehdi.
Bye.